Welcome the Lord's chosen. A small town doesn't fear failure, it fears exposure. That's the part nobody ever says out loud, because when someone rises in a place built on sameness, it doesn't feel inspiring to the crowd, it feels insulting. Not because the person did something wrong, but because they did something different. And difference has a way of dragging buried shame into daylight, whether people like it or not. Here's a quiet fact most people miss. In tightly knit communities, success is often treated like a social violation. Studies on group behavior show that people are more likely to shame a standout individual in small environments than in large ones, not out of cruelty, but self-defense. When one person breaks the invisible rules, everyone else is forced to notice the rules they've been obeying without question. That's when the laughter starts. That's when the jokes get louder. That's when the embarrassment spreads like a nervous cough no one wants to admit they started. And let's be honest for a second, the town doesn't laugh because you failed. They laugh because you tried in public. You dared to step outside the script while everyone else was still rehearsing excuses. Suddenly, your courage became an awkward mirror. And people don't punch mirrors because they hate glass. They do it because they don't like the reflection. There's also a strange kind of humor in it. The same people who swear they don't care somehow know every detail of your moves. The same mouths that say, "Who do they think they are?" never stop talking about you. That's not indifference. That's embarrassment wearing clown makeup and hoping no one notices. This isn't a story about arrogance or ego or trying to be special. It's about what happens when one person unknowingly exposes a collective insecurity. When the town starts laughing a little too hard. When shame turns into jokes. When mockery becomes community bonding. Because sometimes the loudest laughter in the room isn't confidence at all. It's panic, trying not to be recognized. Number one, they laughed because your existence exposed their limits. People like to believe laughter is harmless. But in this case, it wasn't joy, it was defense. When you showed up as yourself, aiming higher, thinking differently, moving with intention, you unknowingly forced everyone around you to face a quiet truth. They had settled, not because they couldn't do more, but because they chose not to. And nothing embarrasses a person faster than being reminded of the choices they keep avoiding. Your existence didn't insult them with words. It did something worse. It stood there calmly, breathing, growing, refusing to apologize for wanting more. That alone exposed the ceiling they had placed over their own lives. Suddenly their routines felt smaller. Their jokes felt older. Their comfort felt like stagnation. Instead of dealing with that discomfort honestly, they laughed it away. Mockery became their escape hatch. Here's the hard part most people miss. They didn't need you to fail because they hated you. They needed you to fail so they could keep believing their limits were permanent, not self-imposed. As long as you stayed normal, their lives made sense. But once you stepped outside the box, their excuses started cracking. And rather than fix the cracks, they attacked the person who revealed them. Laughter gave them temporary relief. It made them feel united, powerful, and right, even if only for a moment. It turned their private shame into a shared joke. The more confidently you moved, the louder the laughter grew, because confidence has a way of stripping people naked emotionally. It shows them who they could be and who they chose not to become. The cruel irony is this: they laughed at you to feel superior, but the laughter itself was proof of inferiority. Secure people don't need to mock ambition. Fulfilled people don't feel threatened by growth. Only those trapped inside their own limits feel exposed by someone else's freedom. So when they laughed, it wasn't because you were ridiculous. It was because your presence quietly said, "This isn't all there is." And for people who built their entire identity around staying comfortable, that sentence feels like an accusation. Number two, Their shame was triggered by your refusal to blend in. The world, especially small towns, runs on invisible rules, and the most powerful one is this: stay quiet, stay small, stay like everyone else. It's subtle, almost invisible, but it keeps the peace. When someone refuses to follow it, it's not just inconvenient, it's threatening. Your refusal to blend in became a mirror, showing everyone around you how willingly they had given up on standing out. And mirrors are dangerous when people are afraid of themselves. They laughed, because it was easier than confronting their own choices. They mocked your style, your ambition, your confidence, your way of existing outside their box. Every step you took beyond the invisible line made them squirm. Why? Because they had sold themselves the lie that blending in was safe. Your refusal broke the illusion. It forced them to acknowledge that comfort and mediocrity were choices, not necessities. That acknowledgement comes with shame, and shame is messy, so they dressed it up as jokes, gossip, and ridicule instead. Here's the brutal truth. People rarely attack the successful itself. They attack the visible defiance, the courage to stand out. Your presence was loud because it was honest. They, on the other hand, had built their lives quietly around compromise and quiet resignation. They had perfected the art of looking like they belonged without actually moving. You unknowingly interrupted that rhythm, and the interruption hurt them more than any failure of yours ever could. What they laughed at wasn't really you. It was the uncomfortable knowledge that they had willingly made themselves small. Your refusal to blend in exposed that choice, and people always hate seeing the truth about themselves. They want comfort, familiarity, and the illusion that life is fair. But you, by simply being different, shattered that illusion. In the end, their laughter was a defense mechanism. It was a shield to hide their own embarrassment. And the more boldly you moved, the louder it became, because you reminded them of everything they had surrendered, everything they had avoided, and everything they would never admit aloud. Number 3, you became a walking reminder of what they avoided becoming. It's funny how presence can sting more than words. You didn't need to announce your ambitions or flaunt your growth. Simply by existing the way you did, by living boldly and refusing to shrink, you became a mirror for everyone around you. And mirrors are dangerous in places where people are comfortable lying to themselves. Every choice you made, every risk you took, every step forward silently shouted, "This is possible." That alone was enough to make people uncomfortable, angry, even embarrassed. They weren't laughing because you were arrogant or loud. They were laughing because you reminded them of their own compromises. They had dreams once, ideas they shelved, passions they abandoned, and courage they buried under routines and excuses. Your life, moving steadily forward, exposed the gap between who they were and who they could have been. That exposure feels like a personal attack, even if you never said a word. And shame has a funny way of disguising itself as mockery. When people feel the sting of their own inaction, the easiest reaction is to ridicule the one who shines. It's like pointing a finger at you distracts them from looking inward. The louder they laugh, the deeper the truth cuts. The more visibly you thrive, the more obvious their surrender becomes. Here's the brutal reality. Your growth wasn't just about you. It was an unsolicited spotlight on the town's collective choices, on the quiet, invisible giving up that everyone agreed to call normal. By refusing to shrink, you forced them to acknowledge what they had let slip away. And most people can't handle that truth without turning it into noise, laughter, gossip, mockery, anything that keeps them from facing the shame they'd rather ignore. So, the next time you hear their laughter, remember this: it's never really about you. It's about the reflection they hate to see. You became the living proof of what they avoided becoming, and that truth hurts far more than any insult could. You didn't just make them uncomfortable. You held up a mirror, and they didn't like the reflection staring back. Number 4, The town needed you to fail to feel normal again. There's a strange comfort in failure. It's predictable, safe, and quietly unifying. The town didn't mock you because they hated you. They mocked you because your success, or even the mere possibility of it, was unsettling. It disrupted the delicate balance they had built around mediocrity, around everyone staying in their lane, around life being comfortably forgettable. When you dared to rise, you became the uninvited reminder that their version of normal was just carefully constructed safety. Your existence forced them to confront a truth they weren't ready to admit. They had chosen caution over courage. Every bold step you took, every decision that defied expectation, made them question their own lives. And questioning is uncomfortable, so they laughed. They gossiped. They turned your progress into a spectacle. Their mockery was a shield, a way to restore equilibrium, a ritual that allowed them to feel safe in their sameness again. The irony is brutal. They didn't want to see you stumble because of fate or incompetence. They needed it. Your failure would prove the rules of their small world were unbreakable. It would justify every compromise, every quiet surrender, every dream they had tucked away in the name of responsibility. If you succeeded, the illusion that they were wise for choosing the easy path would crumble. Success is inconvenient when the majority thrives on conformity and self-deception. And make no mistake, this wasn't conscious cruelty. Most of it was instinctive, almost primitive. People are wired to protect their social reality, and anyone who challenges it becomes a threat. The town didn't need you to falter because of your own mistakes. They needed you to falter to maintain their collective sense of control. But here's the twist. Needing you to fail only amplifies your power. Their laughter, their shame, their desperate hope for your downfall, all of it proves that you are operating on a level they cannot reach. You became a disruptor without even trying, a living contradiction to the safety they cling to. And deep down, they know it. That's why the laughter is so loud and the mockery so relentless. It's fear disguised as amusement, and it speaks volumes about the lives they settled for. Number 5. Mockery was their way of regaining control. Power isn't always about influence or money. Sometimes it's as simple as controlling the narrative, deciding who belongs and who doesn't. When you stepped into a space with ambition, confidence, or vision, you unintentionally threatened that balance. The town didn't know how to handle someone who refused to shrink to fit their comfort zone, so they used the oldest trick in the book: mockery. Ridicule becomes a weapon when people feel powerless. And suddenly your growth, your choices, your very existence became a target. They laughed at your ideas, your style, your energy, not because it was laughable, but because acknowledging your presence honestly would have forced them to admit their own stagnation. When life exposes their limitations, discomfort follows, and humans are surprisingly creative when it comes to defending themselves. Mockery is convenient. It transforms fear, envy, and shame into something that feels active instead of passive. Instead of confronting their insecurities, they aimed at you. Every joke, every whisper, every sideways comment was a subtle attempt to wrest control back from someone whose existence reminded them how little control they truly had. The truth is brutal. When people feel threatened, their first instinct is to undermine. The louder their laughter, the deeper their unease. They aren't just attacking you, they are attacking the very idea that anyone could defy the invisible rules of their environment. You became a walking anomaly, and anomalies make people uncomfortable because they force recognition. If you fail, they regain control. If you succeed, they are forced to question every quiet compromise they ever made. And herein lies the paradox. Their mockery proves your power. The effort to diminish you confirms that you matter far more than they can admit. You've pierced the protective bubble they built around their small, safe lives, and that exposure terrifies them. So they laugh, they ridicule, they gossip. It's all an attempt to tip the balance back toward normalcy. But the harder they try, the clearer it becomes that you are the one holding the reins of possibility, and they are merely clinging to a narrative that keeps them comfortable, small, and unchallenged. Number 6, they confused familiarity with truth. People have a strange habit of believing that what they know about someone is absolute truth. They cling to memories, past behaviors, and outdated perceptions as if those snapshots define the entirety of a person. When you changed, grew, or simply refused to stay the person they had catalogued, it threatened their sense of understanding. Familiarity became a lie, and lies make people uncomfortable. That discomfort didn't translate into curiosity or admiration. It translated into mockery, gossip, and exaggerated criticism. The town wasn't laughing at you for what you were doing now. They were laughing at what you had become, a living contradiction to the person they thought they knew. And that contradiction unsettled them because it forced them to confront something inconvenient. The past isn't always a blueprint for the future. Your growth exposed the rigidity of their thinking. The more you evolved, the more their old assumptions were shattered. In small communities, where everyone believes they know each other, any deviation from expectation is treated like rebellion, even if it's just life. Here's where it gets subtle but brutal. When people confuse familiarity with truth, they don't just feel threatened, they feel entitled. They believe they have a claim on who you are, on the narrative of your life, on the person they assumed you would always be. When that claim is denied by your actions, their entitlement turns into ridicule. Laughing at you is easier than admitting they were wrong. Criticizing you is simpler than reflecting on their own stagnation. And while it may sound harmless on the surface, it carries a deeper consequence. Their perception isn't reality. They've trapped themselves in a story about you that no longer exists. Meanwhile, you're living in a world they can't understand or control, and every step you take is a reminder that people don't evolve on their schedule. They evolve on yours. Your existence becomes evidence that their assumptions were flawed, and flawed assumptions make people panic. The laughter is just noise, a way to mask the truth they're too afraid to face. The person they knew never existed in full, and now they're forced to watch the real version of you move forward unapologetically. Number 7, their unity was built on shared insecurity. The so-called strength of a community often hides a quiet vulnerability. In small towns, in tight-knit circles, unity is rarely about shared values or vision. It's about shared insecurities. People bond over what scares them, what they fear, what they've quietly given up on. And when you come along, someone willing to step outside the invisible boundaries, it shakes that foundation. Your confidence, your courage, your refusal to stay small became a threat because it exposed the fragility that held them together. They didn't laugh at you because you were wrong or foolish. They laughed because you forced them to confront the uncomfortable truth. Their cohesion was not about greatness. It was about protection. It was easier to cluster together, to validate each other's choices, to ignore dreams they abandoned, than to face the emptiness behind their comfort. Your presence tore through that illusion. Every bold move you made, every risk you took, became a reminder that their solidarity was built on something shaky, fear disguised as togetherness. And here's the brutal honesty. People who hide behind collective insecurity are some of the most dangerous critics. They don't attack because of envy alone. They attack to survive emotionally. Laughter becomes armor. Gossip becomes strategy. Ridicule becomes a shared ritual, a way to reinforce the story that the town tells itself. We're fine. Life is safe. nothing needs to change. Your refusal to blend in disrupted that story, and for them, disruption is terrifying. The irony is that your growth wasn't meant to challenge them. It simply existed. They projected their discomfort onto you because they couldn't look inward without collapsing. By daring to be different, you illuminated the cracks in their comfort, and comfort built on fear is fragile. The louder they laugh, the harder they cling to each other, trying desperately to restore balance. But their unity was never about truth or courage. It was about survival. And you became the undeniable proof that survival without growth is a lie, a fragile bubble waiting to pop. Your existence exposed the insecurity beneath the facade, and that's what made them react with mockery, defensiveness, and an almost frantic need to pull you back down to their level. Number 8, your difference threatened their social order. In any tightly knit community, there's an unspoken hierarchy, a rhythm, a balance, a predictable order that everyone unconsciously follows. People know their place, their roles, their limits, and as long as everyone stays within them, life feels safe. You, by simply being different, became a disruption to that order. You didn't ask permission, you didn't seek approval, and you didn't try to fit into the pre-written script everyone else was reciting. That alone made people uncomfortable because humans fear unpredictability more than they fear failure. Your choices, your confidence, your ambition, all of it signaled something dangerous. That the rules they lived by were optional, that the hierarchy wasn't fixed, that the comfort they built their lives around was fragile. And when someone threatens the invisible social order, the reaction is rarely calm reflection. Instead, it comes out as laughter, gossip, judgment, and mockery. By standing out, you force them to confront the unspoken truth that life doesn't have to look like what they've accepted. Here's the uncomfortable reality. Most people cling to social order as a form of control. They convince themselves that by keeping everyone in line, life remains stable. But your difference exposed that control as an illusion. It showed that their sense of security is built on compliance and quiet compromise. That exposure makes people defensive, aggressive, and, ironically, desperate to restore the balance, often at your expense. The louder they ridicule, the more they are admitting without words that your existence makes their world feel unstable. They mock you because if they can push you back into the mold, even symbolically, they can convince themselves that the social order is intact. But the truth is, you've already shifted it just by refusing to conform. The order they depended on is now a story, and your difference is the inconvenient truth that won't be silenced. Being different isn't a crime, but in a place built on predictability, it's dangerous. Your presence threatens the carefully constructed illusions of stability, and the louder they push back, the clearer it becomes. They fear change more than they fear failure. And you, simply by being yourself, are the living proof that life can exist beyond the limits they've imposed. Number 9, they mistook loud judgment for moral superiority. It's a quiet tragedy how often people believe that loud voices equal wisdom. In the town, the ones who laughed the hardest, criticized the most, and whispered the sharpest words, convinced themselves that volume was authority. They didn't just mock you, they judged you, as if their opinions carried an invisible badge of moral superiority. The irony is brutal. The louder they were, the more insecure they truly felt. Judgment became their armor against the truth your existence highlighted. You didn't need to confront them. Simply living boldly, refusing to shrink, and stepping into your own path exposed their compromises, their fear, and their quiet surrender. They weren't equipped to handle that kind of honesty, so they dressed their discomfort in judgment. Calling you arrogant, reckless, or too much wasn't about facts. It was about self-preservation. They needed to position themselves as right, to protect the fragile narrative they had built around their own lives. Here's the uncomfortable truth. People often mistake criticism for virtue. If they can loudly declare you wrong, they can feel right. If they can convince others you're misguided, they can convince themselves that their own choices are justified. The louder they speak, the more certain they feel about their moral high ground, even though it's built on insecurity and avoidance. You, in your authenticity, became the measuring stick they weren't willing to hold for themselves. Mockery disguised as judgment is especially dangerous because it feels righteous. It allows them to attack without introspection, to assert dominance without merit, and to feel superior without accomplishment. And the more you succeed, the louder the noise becomes. Your confidence, clarity, and self-possession are threats to their fragile sense of rightness. The truth is, their judgment says nothing about you. It reveals everything about them: the fear, the envy, the discomfort of being confronted with someone who refuses to conform. Their laughter, criticism, and gossip aren't evidence of your failure. They are proof that you are operating on a level they cannot comprehend. Moral superiority isn't about shouting the loudest. It's about living with integrity. And in that sense, you have already won the unspoken battle they are too afraid to fight openly. Number 10. Your growth exposed. The cost of staying comfortable. Growth is never quiet, even if you don't speak. The way you live, the choices you make, and the energy you carry can be louder than any words. In a town built on routine, comfort, and carefully constructed boundaries, your growth became a spotlight, shining on what everyone else had willingly left behind. They didn't just notice your progress. They felt it in the pit of their stomachs, because it reminded them of the invisible cost of their own complacency. And cost is a word most people prefer not to measure. You didn't ask for attention. You simply evolved. You took risks they avoided. You challenged norms they silently obeyed. You worked on yourself while they stayed static, finding excuses or distractions to justify staying safe. And every time you moved forward, it highlighted a truth they couldn't face. Comfort comes at a price, and that price is often regret, mediocrity, and unfulfilled potential. Your success, or even your relentless effort, became a living proof of that cost, and living proof is hard to ignore. The reaction was predictable but telling. Mockery, gossip, and judgment became their tools, not because they were malicious, but because your presence made them uncomfortable. When someone's growth mirrors the choices they avoided, it exposes the cracks in their own lives. The laughter, the whispers, and the side comments weren't about you. They were shields against reality. By pointing at you, they tried to point away from themselves. By reducing your victories, they tried to reduce their own awareness of what they were missing. And the irony is brutal. The more you grow, the louder their discomfort becomes. But that discomfort only proves your progress. Every time they laugh, roll their eyes, or shake their heads, it confirms that you are moving forward while they remain trapped in their illusions of safety. Your growth is not just your own. It's a mirror they refuse to look into, and the truth reflected back is unbearable. You didn't just outgrow them. You exposed the hidden cost of choosing comfort over courage, and that revelation stings far more than any insult they can throw at you. Number 11, they needed you to be delusional, to justify their stagnation. In a town where conformity is comfort, people often convince themselves that staying in place is wisdom. They tell themselves they're practical, realistic, or sensible, but deep down they know they're avoiding risk, ambition, and discomfort. When you stepped forward thinking bigger, moving faster, and living differently, it threatened the delicate story they told themselves about why they stayed small. For them to maintain peace with their choices, they had to label you as delusional, unrealistic, or reckless. Your clarity and drive became inconvenient truths that needed to be minimized. The laughter, the gossip, the eye rolls, they weren't about you. They were defense mechanisms, armor against a reality they weren't willing to face. Every time you dared to pursue your goals, to take risks, to refuse compromise, it highlighted a question they didn't want to answer. Why haven't I done the same? And facing that question is uncomfortable. It's far easier to mock ambition than to confront fear, easier to belittle progress than to examine choices, and easier to call someone delusional than to admit your own stagnation. This need to see you as delusional reveals something deeper. They are terrified of being exposed. Your confidence, your movement, your refusal to play small exposes the truth that growth requires courage, effort, and discomfort, qualities they've avoided. By labeling you as out of touch with reality, they regain a false sense of moral and practical superiority, convincing themselves that staying in place is reasonable, not cowardly. Ironically, the harder they try to diminish you, the more obvious your clarity becomes. Every insult, every whispered judgment, every mocking glance is proof that you are operating on a level they cannot reach. They need you to be delusional, but the truth is that it's their own lives that are out of alignment. You didn't need to prove anything to them. Your existence alone exposes their compromise, and their mockery is just an attempt to protect a fragile ego from the uncomfortable mirror you hold up every single day. Number 12. The embarrassment was never yours to carry. There's a misconception that being mocked or ridiculed makes you the one who should feel ashamed. In reality, embarrassment is rarely born from your actions. It's born from the weakness of those who can't handle your presence. When the town laughed, whispered, and pointed fingers, they weren't commenting on your worth or your choices. They were exposing their own fear, insecurity, and smallness. The humiliation was theirs, but they tried to make it yours, hoping it would silence the truth you represented. Every joke, every sarcastic remark, every sideways glance was a projection. They were uncomfortable not because you failed, but because your life illuminated the compromises, laziness, and fear they had quietly accepted. Your clarity, your ambition, your courage, they had none of it, and your existence reminded them of what they weren't willing to become. That reflection hurt, and so they tried to pass that pain on to you, as if making you the target could erase their own inadequacy. Here's the brutal honesty. Embarrassment cannot be borrowed. You didn't earn it, and you didn't deserve it. The louder the mockery, the deeper their insecurity runs. They laugh to feel superior, but superiority built on someone else's discomfort is fragile, temporary, and obvious to anyone paying attention. Their attempts to shame you only highlight how exposed they felt, how fragile their sense of self really was. The power in this realization is liberating. Once you understand that the embarrassment isn't yours, it loses all weight. You don't shrink, you don't apologize, and you don't allow their fear to define your experience. Their laughter is noise. Their judgment is background static. What remains is your truth, your growth, and the life you are building unapologetically. In the end, they are the ones who should be ashamed. Not for what you did, but for what they refused to do, for what they avoided seeing, and for the small lives they tried to justify with mockery. The embarrassment was never yours. It was theirs, disguised in loud voices, gossip, and judgment. And the moment you recognize that, their power over you disappears entirely. Number 13. They laughed loudest when they felt the most exposed. Laughter is often mistaken for confidence, but in reality, it's one of the most common masks for fear. The louder, sharper, and more persistent the laughter, the deeper the insecurity it hides. In the town, the people who ridiculed you the most weren't doing it out of strength. They were doing it out of panic. Your presence, your ambition, your refusal to stay small, all forced them to confront truths they had buried long ago. And when someone's carefully constructed self-image is challenged, the first instinct is noise, mockery, gossip, and over-the-top judgment. They weren't just laughing at your choices. They were laughing to convince themselves that they were still in control. Every confident step you took, every bold decision you made them feel exposed. The truth is uncomfortable. Deep down, they feared you because your clarity reminded them of everything they had ignored, delayed, or surrendered. The louder they laughed, the more desperate they became to drown out the reflection you held up. There's a certain irony in all this. The very energy they used to mock you, the judgment, the gossip, the sideways comments, wasn't directed at your failure. It was a shield against their own self-awareness. They needed to create a narrative in which you were flawed, unreasonable, or excessive so that they could preserve the illusion that their smallness was safety. And in doing so, they revealed exactly how vulnerable they felt when faced with someone unafraid to be fully alive. Here's the subtle truth. When people react this way, it's proof of your impact. Your presence exposes their insecurity like a spotlight in a dark room. Their laughter, once interpreted as dismissal, becomes evidence of the fear they are hiding. Every joke, every mocking glance, every whisper, all confirm that you are operating on a level they cannot reach, a level that forces them to confront their own inadequacies without the courage to do so openly. So the next time their laughter rings out, remember this: it isn't about you at all. It's about them, their fear, and the reflection they refuse to face. And the louder it gets, the clearer it becomes that you are the one standing in truth while they are trapped in denial. Number 14. One day, the town will pretend they always believed in you. Time has a way of rewriting stories, especially for those who once laughed the loudest. The very people who mocked, whispered, and judged you will eventually smooth over their embarrassment with convenient narratives. They will tell anyone who listens that they saw it all along, that they always knew you were destined for more, that your success was obvious from the start. And the truth is, this isn't about honesty. It's about saving face, preserving pride, and convincing themselves that they were never wrong, never small, never envious. The irony is delicious. Their manufactured support is meaningless, a polite veneer over the shame they felt when your ambition and courage exposed their limits. They will rewrite the past, but they cannot erase the memory of how uncomfortable your presence made them. Every mocking laugh, every sideways glance, every whispered criticism will remain as evidence of their insecurity. Yet history has a funny way of favoring the bold. While they pretend to have believed in you, everyone who truly witnessed the journey knows the truth. It was your resilience, your refusal to shrink, your unwillingness to be silenced that carried you forward, not their validation. And there's power in watching it unfold. The same people who once ridiculed you will now clamor to associate themselves with your success, trying to bask in the reflected glory they once sought to diminish. Their words will change, their tone will soften, and they will offer congratulations that are performative rather than earned. But at that moment, you will hold the real victory: authenticity, persistence, and the knowledge that their support was never necessary to reach your destination. This is the final unspoken truth about those who laughed when you dared to stand out. Their eventual praise doesn't define your journey. You've already lived the story that matters, the story of courage, growth, and relentless self-belief. They may try to claim they always knew, but the reality is simple. Your life was never about convincing them. Your life was about proving to yourself and the world that standing unapologetically in your power is the only path to true freedom. And when they finally catch up, it will be too late. The town's applause will echo, but your legacy will already be written. The truth is this: when you rise, when you refuse to shrink, when you live boldly in a world built on comfort and conformity, you don't just change your own life. You expose the limits, insecurities, and compromises of everyone around you. Every laugh, every whisper, every sideways glance aimed your way was never truly about you. It was about the fear and shame of those who cannot face their own potential. They mocked, judged, and tried to diminish you because your presence revealed what they had surrendered, what they had avoided, and what they feared. But here's the beautiful, unstoppable reality. Their words, their gossip, their mockery cannot touch your truth. You are not defined by their discomfort, nor by their desperate attempts to reclaim control over a world you are quietly reshaping. Your growth, courage, and clarity are living proof that authenticity and ambition are far more powerful than conformity and fear. The louder they laughed, the clearer it became that you were moving beyond their reach, that your path could never be contained by the limits they built for themselves. One day they may try to rewrite history, pretending they always believed in you, but that doesn't change a single step of your journey. The applause, the validation, the recognition, they are secondary. What matters is that you stood, you persisted, and you refused to apologize for being more than they expected, more than they could handle, and more than their fears allowed them to be. So remember this: their embarrassment, their judgment, and their mockery were never yours to carry. You have already won by simply daring to rise, to stand out, and to live without compromise. You are the one writing your story, and no one else has the power to redefine it. If this resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more powerful insights. Like this video to support the journey. Comment your thoughts and experiences down below, and share it with someone who needs to hear the truth today. Let's keep rising together. Stay blessed always.